Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the media. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this press conference. I'm grateful this afternoon to have all the fellow members of the opposition. We are all here to participate in this news conference. And we're here with you to speak about the reasons why we were collectively absent, I should say, from Parliament this morning as it commenced its business. But over the past week, the entire country has witnessed firsthand what can be considered a government that has become increasingly desperate and heavy-handed and willing to ignore proper procedures and rules. The opposition, we are concerned that the Speaker has resigned and is expecting to continue to chair and is being enabled to do so by the government. Regardless of any purportedly effective date, the fact is that Mr. Bush has resigned as Speaker and must demit the chair immediately, and the Deputy Speaker sit as the presiding officer as required by Section 4(1)(b) of the Standing Orders. I would also add that not only have they banded together to prevent a motion of lack of confidence in the Speaker from being debated, but they have done so on a false premise. This refusal of a valid motion is inexcusable. It's a violation of all democratic principles of Parliament, and it is a stifling of the voice of the opposition. I regret to say that under this government, we are rapidly becoming a kangaroo Parliament. We take our oath seriously, and we swore to serve the people of the Cayman Islands in the House of Parliament. We would be abdicating our duty to the country to participate in the sham that today's meeting of Parliament has become. And so as an opposition, we have collectively decided that we will not participate in Parliament with Speaker Bush as the presiding officer. With that short statement, members of the media, I will open this press conference up to your questions.
Yeah, Roy, are you saying that you won't participate in any of this session then, while Mr. Bush is still the Speaker? It's expected to be, I guess, this whole raft of legislation that's coming up next week as well.
Yeah, yes, James, that's exactly what we are saying, that as long as he remains in the chair, we will not participate in Parliament. We believe it would be really a disservice to the people of the Cayman Islands, particularly women, to continue to support his remaining in the chair of the Parliament.
Okay. So do you not, I guess the flip side of that would be that it's obviously a service to the community for you to debate these fairly important legislation coming up next week?
James, I'm not able to hear your question at all.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Little bit better, so let's try it, see if I can make it out, honestly.
Yeah, I guess the flip side of that point, though, is that there are fairly important pieces of legislation coming up. Do you not see it as part of your duty to be there in the House for that? Well,
my view is that to continue to sit there with him as in the chair, it really is, trying to think of the right word, would not be doing service to the people of the Cayman Islands. He has tendered his resignation. He should demit the chair and allow the Deputy Speaker to chair it. There's no reason for him to stay on, James, until November 30th. The Constitution and the Standing Orders speak adequately to that, in that there is the place for the Deputy Speaker, and he doesn't need to stay and sit in on chair sessions of Parliament until they can find a new Speaker. We have a deputy, and she should be taking that chair.
What would you say to kind of his argument that this is sub judice, that he's done nothing wrong, and that'll be proven over time?
I'm not sure I hear you.
What?
Mr. Bush has argued that this whole matter is sub judice, and he hasn't actually done anything wrong. He's sort of claimed that this is opportunism on your part. What do you feel about that?
Not that he needs to deal with the point that he has resigned. And clearly he must accept that there is a problem. And so regardless of whether it is sub judice or not, he has resigned his post and should demit and allow the deputy speaker to step in.
Just a slightly separate point, the motion of no confidence that you brought in the government. Why are you not there to debate that today and to argue for that motion?
Can you?
Why aren't we there debating the?
Well, I think I've heard your question, James, but the situation with that is that yesterday when we went into the business committee meeting, the government used their superiority of numbers to replace our motion of no confidence in the government, which had been filed well over a week ago, certainly at least a week before they filed their own motion of confidence. And they took and they replaced we were scheduled to be the first item of business on the agenda on Wednesday when we were supposed to commence Parliament, and rightfully so. And they took it, and yesterday afternoon, they replaced it with their own motion of confidence in their government. Now, when you look at the difference between a motion of confidence and one of no confidence, there is very little consequences as a result of a motion of confidence in a government. They're singing their own praises. But our motion had real substance. A vote will have to be taken on people's positions with regard to their support for and their confidence in the government. And that, I think, is a real key or element of the whole debate here, is that one, in consuming dealing with their motion, the principles that we or arguments that we would likely make in opposing that motion are the same that we would be making when it came time to debate our own motion. So it would be a complete repeat, in my mind, of what would take place in debating the government motion of support for themselves with no consequences whatsoever.
Well, Dwayne Seymour spoke to the motion this morning, and he said the political maths just hadn't added up for you. He seemed to acknowledge, to be honest, that he'd been talking to you guys. I don't know, were you hopeful that you would get the numbers for some kind of regime change?
James, James, the leader is not hearing your question. But if you want, I can swiftly answer it, because I think I was dealing more with the back and forth with members of the government in terms of forming another government. I think the whole country knows that there has been great dissension, division, lack of cohesion in policies ever since the government took office. But this is the third, I think, serious challenge that Premier Patton has had to keeping his government together. Some of his members, including some of his ministers, have made no secret of their lack of support for him as the leader. And a number of them have been speaking to various members of our team about putting together another government. Premier Patton himself has spoken to the leader about the possibility of forming a government, him and some other of his team forming a government with us. The problem with that, from our standpoint, was that he insisted that he had to remain as premier. And I'm afraid none of us have any confidence in his ability to lead and he certainly demonstrated a lack of ability to lead the group he's currently with. And so we wouldn't that conversation didn't get very far. But a number of them, and certainly enough of them to form another government, have been speaking with us on numerous occasions. What is incredibly ironic is the leader of the charge, certainly in terms of speaking to me, to change the government has been MP Dwayne Seymour. And it is therefore a delicious irony that he is the mover of the motion of confidence in the government. But if you analyze what he said, there were not a great many compliments paid to the Premier by MP Seymour. He spent his time focusing on what he now says are achievements of the government. But when he was speaking with me, his position was that the government had achieved virtually nothing in 18 months. So there's been a lot of back and forth, but it is clear now that for better or for worse, the PAC government is going to carry on. And so from my standpoint, despite the shenanigans in business committee, I would have been happy to go down there and deal with their confidence motion. As the leader said, I put forward whatever arguments that we could have put forward in relation to our lack of confidence motion. But the fundamental point here, and the reason why we will not attend Parliament, is to do with the refusal of the government through a completely inexperienced deputy speaker, preventing a legitimate lack of confidence motion in the speaker from being brought to the House for debate. And coupled with that, now, Mr. Bush is in the chair as though nothing has occurred, despite the fact that he's issued a statement again saying that he intends to resign with effect from the 30th of November. I have heard, I've been reliably informed that in fact, initially, the government had agreed to keep him on until the 31st of January. We shall all wait and see whether he leaves at all.
Thank you.
Can I have a go?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say that. Go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, because it just follows on from what Sir Alden just said. Can you hear me okay?
Barely, Wendy.
Is that any better?
A bit. Marginally.
Or is that better?
Yeah, my hearing is a little better than my leader, so I'll have to translate for him.
Okay. What I would like to ask you is, because you just said that they're acting as though nothing has occurred. Well, I think all of your good selves also sat with McKeever Bush after he'd been convicted of an assault, like a proper crime. I mean, I'm not saying that what he hasn't done this time isn't also troublesome, and that it is troublesome that he's sitting in the chair, but you didn't have any problems with it and presided over the hoop-de-doop of the opening of Parliament, all while he was sitting there with a criminal conviction.
Well, yeah, I don't think that is accurate. There were no meetings of Parliament after, as far as I can remember, my memory may be a bit faulty, but Mr. Bush was convicted back in December of 2020. And to the best of my recollection, there were no other 2020. No, 2020. 2020. And to the best of my recollection, there were no other meetings of Parliament again until Parliament was dissolved. You will remember that
there was the celebrations for the actual the plaque unveiling and everything.
Absolutely. And that was actually the day, I think, after after he was sentenced, I think.
Yes.
Right, if I remember correctly. But when the challenge was brought by the then leader of the opposition, Arden McLean, and the now Deputy Premier, Chris Saunders, to attempt to put together a special meeting of the House to deal with that lack of confidence motion, I, as Premier, had two choices. We could have gone on and dealt with the lack of confidence motion and see who voted in favor or not of Mr. Bush remaining. Or we could do as has been done and is usually done in most democracies, put the question to the people in terms of a new election. And that is what I did. We did not do, or I as Premier at the time certainly did not do what this Premier and this government is doing, seeking to avoid any challenge to the Speaker remaining in the chair. I spoke to the Governor. I asked him to call new elections. We had new elections. The people voted. The people voted all of my team back in, except Austin Harris. Mr. Panton, Premier Panton, used the opportunity created by Mr. Bush's misconduct as a basis for a whole campaign in which he said very publicly that it is clear that his principles no longer accord with those of the progressives. He used that as the basis for his campaign. You remember, is she supported? My question now is, are they supported because we now have allegedly multiple victims? Mr. Panton, Premier Panton formed a government with McKeever Bush in the full knowledge of what had transpired prior to that, in full knowledge of the conviction. At least when I formed the government with Mr. Bush, we did not have that situation. And when the challenge came, I put it to the people to determine whether Mr. Bush should be re-elected or not. But we refused, all of us sitting here, to go back with Mr. Bush. Otherwise, we would be sitting where the PAC government now is, because it was Mr. Bush's preference to form government with us, rather than with Mr. Panton, whom I know personally, he dislikes very much.
Fair enough. Actually, if you're going to be that, given how candid you're being about people, you say that Premier Panton as well as Dwayne Seymour were the two sort of people that have spoken to the progressives about forming an alternative government. Are you willing to say what other members of the PACT government also came to you? There's been sort of some denials. There's been a lot of names bandied around and denials being made. So it would be good to have you on the record saying who came to you.
Well, Premier Panton did not speak to me. He spoke to the leader. But I had multiple conversations with MP Dwayne Seymour. I will let other members decide whether they want to talk about any of their interaction. But the point is that most of the current PAC team at one time or another have spoken to some of us about changing the Premier. All of the issues have been laid at the feet of the Premier, at least as far as representations made to us by the PAC members. And this has been going on for well over a year.
Anyone? Is anyone else willing to say?
I'll just say, overall, when addressing first the motion of no confidence on the government, we would not have brought that motion had we not had reason to, had we not been encouraged to, had we not had concerns that nothing was happening for our country. You can look for yourself, you can read the cabinet briefs that they put out. They're very brief. We've only been to Parliament one time before this. There has been no major legislation in almost 2 years. And we also knew of persons within the PAC government trying to organize themselves within to overthrow the premier. We were approached about bringing this motion a long time ago. And we said, no, we would not. We have no reason to bring the motion. But as time went on and it became apparent that they were dysfunctional, and others reached out to us to form a government, that we thought we would put this to bed once and for all and bring the motion. We did that. The storm came, it has been delayed, and then of course the incident with the speaker. The governor called for the speaker's resignation. The premier himself, even citing his responsibility for gender affairs in his letter to the speaker, called for his resignation with a deadline. We gave the premier an extra week because he said that the storm was a distraction. We gave him an extra week. He then extended or delayed Parliament, allowing for further filing of motions, which we thought he certainly would have filed a motion of no confidence against the speaker because he had not resigned at that point. When that did not happen, we filed a motion of no confidence against the speaker well within time and with the support of a letter from the clerk of the Parliament saying that the deadline for filing of motions would be 5 p.m. on the Friday. We filed the motion before 4 p.m. Now to get here, where they have decided, or they filed within the same time period, a motion of confidence, which is obvious that they intended to hear the motion of confidence first, and then move a motion to not hear our motion of no confidence, which makes sense, because if they vote and they had the numbers to vote that they have full confidence in their government, it would make no sense to debate a motion of no confidence. We were bullied yesterday afternoon in the business committee, and our motion was taken from the top of the order paper and put in second. And we were still denied the opportunity to debate the no confidence motion on the speaker. How is that democratic? How can we go to the Parliament this morning and hold our heads high and say we are doing the work of the people, we are representing the people, we are doing our democratic duty as an opposition, when we are not being allowed to be heard?
Point taken. The Parliament, whilst we've been doing this, they've already moved a motion to accept the Speaker's resignation. So now that's sort of done and dusted and rubber stamped in the Parliament, it will mean that it's not going to happen. Like, he's going to sit in that chair now till at least the 30th of November and maybe longer, as you point out. So given that there is historic legislation coming, especially for the poor law, would it not really now have better, as there's nothing you can do by boycotting, to actually return and get involved with the laws? Did you hear me? No? You're all looking puzzled.
Sorry, Wendy, we do have some background noise here. You're saying that they just voted on accepting the speaker's resignation on what date?
Correct, just now.
And for what date?
In accordance with his letter.
But that's still, there is no, but he should not be in the chair. That's fine.
I appreciate, I 100%, yeah.
But the deputy speaker should be in the chair, or give us the opportunity to debate our motion of no confidence in the speaker, because he should vacate that chair immediately.
Okay, I get your point. So you're arguing that despite accepting that motion and accepting his resignation formally and officially, they should still put Kathy, the deputy speaker, in the chair?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I just wanted to clarify that. So that means that you will not participate in the debate on the change to the poor law. Do you have any views about that piece of legislation?
We would love to be there to debate that piece of legislation, Wendy. I think it is an important piece of legislation. We will say that the legislation itself, from what we have seen, really doesn't have the guts of the changes in it. Those will all be in the regulations, which we have not had an opportunity to see as yet. However, we have taken a decision here today that we would not return to Parliament as long as the Speaker, the embattled Speaker, remains in the chair. That's fine if they want to give him his salary and pensions right up until November 30th or January 31st, whatever, but he should vacate the chair and let the Deputy Speaker sit in the chair. They have the numbers. There's nothing to worry about. There's just 6 of us. They have the numbers to allow the Deputy Speaker to sit in the chair, and that is the right thing to do. And Premier Panton knows that that is the right thing to do.
Okay.
So
I just
the point that the deputy leader has made about the legislation dealing with financial assistance. All that is a piece of framework legislation. As the deputy premier said, none of the actual provisions which are going to improve the way things operate are in the framework legislation. Now, there's nothing wrong with having framework legislation and the other administrative bits in regulations. That's done fairly commonly. We have asked the minister to let us have sight of the regulations. He said, no, we can't. I understand the reason why he said no is because they aren't ready. So this is a great PR exercise by the minister saying, oh, I've got a great piece of new forward-looking legislation to deal with the financial needs of those persons who are needed. But it's nothing more or not much more than a good PR exercise, because the nuts and bolts that are going to make it work or not work properly are not provided now. And so we're not in a position where we can comment on it. The framework is fine. I don't think any of us have any issue with the framework, but there's so little in the framework that, you know, I think we all agree on the broad principles of modernizing the way that we provide social support for people in need. But it's the nuts and bolts of how it works that really ought to concern, we ought to concern ourselves about. And Parliament is not being given the privilege at this stage to be able to, or members of Parliament, to comment on that, because it's not been given to us.
Will you get legislation at any time now before Parliament, or will that now be a matter for it'll just be published and you won't be able to comment on it even on another occasion?
No, regulations like that don't come back to Parliament.
Right. Okay, that's what I thought.
If you get the framework legislation with the regulations, when you're debating the bill, you can deal with it that way. But the regulations themselves wouldn't come back to the House, not normally.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. My only final point, and I'll hand back to James if he has anything, is just I'm going to ask you all once again: are you willing to give any more names of members of the pact government that have approached any of you?
I'm hurt.
I've given my confession.
Yeah, I've got yours. It's great. But I was just wondering if you wanted to mention any other names. I mean, obviously, Miss Julia Connolly has been cited as somebody that came. Also, Miss Kathy Ebanks-Wilkes. Are you willing to say yes or no to those? And were there any others?
I think you hear as much as we hear, and I do believe that those names that you called and a few others were not at all satisfied with the direction the government was going and with their leadership.
Right.
I think another, I can say this from personal experience, another very vocal critic of Premier Panton and his leadership has been Minister J. Ebanks, who on more than one occasion has told me in not very complimentary terms of what he thinks of the Premier's leadership. And we're publicly as well. I wasn't a private conversation.
I was going to say, I think the government versus government tells us everything we need to know about that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've done. If James has more.
Yeah, just one final question, guys. I mean, having had all these conversations, what happened between then and now? Have you been outmaneuvered? Because the government is on the floor of the House now, giving its full support to Premier Panton.
Well, I think we all are certain that there has been significant intervention by certain people to keep pact intact. But I'm not in a position to say that, to go into the detail that I've been told, because I haven't been able to confirm the detail. Although having knocked around politics for the best part of 30 years now, I think I can recognize the signs of when they are when somebody else is moving the pawns around on the chessboard.
So James, I would say that I think I said it on the radio on Wednesday morning, that if this motion of no confidence in the government brings them together, then we have achieved what we've set out to, because we would just like to see this country move forward. We would like to see work being done. We would like to see our people being helped, being inundated by persons needing help. If that is what we caused with this motion, then so be it. But what concerns me, even as MP Seymour said this morning, that this is a reset for them, that they've hit the reset button. But on the heels of hitting a reset button, the way they have bullied us in these last few days, the way they have removed our democratic right to debate and to bring motions to the floor of the parliament, that's a terrible way to start a reset.
Thank you, guys.
Actually, can I just have one final question? Because you keep saying they've done nothing at all, and maybe they haven't had a great legislative agenda, but the free school meals, probably one of the most sort of important policy positions of any government ever, to give all kids free food at school. No one's ever done anything quite that significant.
That was a conversation that started during our term, and we fully supported it, and we voted unanimously for the funding. That is all they needed at that point, was the funding for it. And I can say to you that because we did not have any school for the last 2 years of our or year and change of our term because of COVID, that those plans were already in the works. And yes, we supported it 100% when the vote came during the the only time we heard about it was during the budget, and we supported it. We knew about it from before. We knew that this was a passion of the minister, and it had been discussed from during our agenda. And so we were in 100% support of it.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
And Wendy and James, I would just like to say, as a woman or a lady parliamentarian, I feel very uncomfortable sitting in Parliament today with Mr. Bush in that speaker chair. And I would like to challenge those 3 women parliamentarians that are in government to let this country know how they are going to sit there today based on the disrespect that Mr. Bush has for the women of this country.
Amen.
Amen is right.
Amen.
Thank you all for being here this afternoon, and I wish you all a very happy weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.